Welcome, everyone, to another podcast, Women, Hormones, Adrenals, Trauma, and Weight. So today I'm really excited to have somebody on board with me. Her name is Tricia Nelson. And I've actually known Tricia for a number of years. She has family in Maine, so I know her from that as well. So let me tell you a little bit about her. So Tricia lost 50 pounds by identifying and healing the underlying causes for emotional eating. Tricia spent over 30 years researching the hidden causes of addictive personality. Tricia is an emotional eating expert, a TED Talk speaker, and author of the #1 best-selling book, Heal Your Hunger: 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. Tricia is the host of popular podcast, The Heal Your Hunger Show, and is a highly regarded speaker. Tricia has been featured on NBC, CBS, KLTALA, never heard of that, Fox, and then the list. So I'm so excited to talk with her about it today because it is an issue that many people have, and I wanted her to bring light to this subject. So let's welcome Trish. Welcome, Tricia.
Thank you.
Dig in today to an issue that I think a lot of people have, and that is, if somebody thinks they're an emotional eater, how do we know if they're a food addict, emotional eater, or if they've just been spent the whole life dieting and they don't kind of know how to kind of take care of themselves? What's the difference?
Yeah, so my experience is that it's really a continuum and a spectrum. And so, and I was on the high end of the spectrum. So on the low end, I think it's your baseline emotional eater. And I think, honestly, we're all hardwired to have an emotional connection with food, right? Like we can all go overboard now and then. So I think everybody's got it in them. So they're maybe on the low end of the spectrum if they don't have any other troubles. But as the troubles increase and as the control decreases, we get into, more of an emotional eater, if not a food addict. And so that's the high end of the spectrum. That's where I was. I was a binge eater. I could pack away 2,000 calories in a sitting, 3,000 calories with ice cream and chips, and gotta have salty with the sweet after all. And then, the cookies and carbs. So my experience is it's really where somebody ends up on that spectrum. And I actually have a quiz on my website that helps people determine that. But the two qualifiers are the level of control that someone has and the number of consequences someone has. So let's say somebody goes on a cruise, right? We go on a cruise. It's like, well, I paid for it. I might as well eat the cheese and the wine and all those desserts. And we come home from the cruise and we've gained 5 pounds. Our pants are snug and we're like, I don't like this. So then we go and jog extra for a couple weeks, cut out sweets, and boom, those 5 pounds are off. That's somebody with not too much, too many consequences, and with a good amount of control because they can course correct. That was not me. So once I, I was 50 pounds overweight, and that was because once I started to eat, like once I veered off my healthy eating plan, I could easily slide down the rabbit hole into a dark place where I just was in this binging at night in front of the TV. And then the next day I'm like not eating breakfast, not eating lunch because I want to course correct, but then I binge again because I set myself up by not eating. So that kind of binge eating pattern, is an evidence of lack of control and mounting consequences. Because if you live that way for long enough, which I know we know plenty of women who are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and they have literally been dieting for decades, it takes its toll. Our bodies are like, I'm not taking this, and our joints are in pain. Our bodies are in pain. We've got diabetes, we've got gut issues, autoimmune issues, not to mention heart issues. So our bodies take the beating the longer we've been doing this. And so I would just say, take a quiz, find out where you are on that spectrum. And that's going to determine sort of, especially what steps you need to take to overcome it. So it's a bummer. Like I was like by age 21, I was just an all out food addict, very little control to course correct.
So let's talk about something that you might not know I was going to ask you about, and that is that we have many programs out there, Food Addicts Anonymous. We've got Overeaters Anonymous. And I was one of the people that my whole practice was eating disorders for the first 2 years of my existence. And I did all the health pieces and all that stuff. And then many of them were at OA or went to rehabs. The part that was so distressing to me is it never really dealt with the deeper issues. And it made them have so much control over food that they had to weigh and measure everything. And to this day, there is someone in my dance community, she still weighs and measures everything after 22 years. And what I worry about with that is because there were times that I would say, look, I need them to have some fat, some healthy fats, and they need to have more than you're giving them. And they wouldn't allow it. And it was really hard for me. I think it's beneficial for some people initially, perhaps. What are your thoughts about all this?
I love that. We have had a conversation about this in the past, and I, my experience is I started in Overeaters Anonymous, and I'm grateful for that because I needed to start somewhere, and it was at least not all out diet mode, right? And unfortunately, there are so many offshoots now of Overeaters Anonymous and they're all based on different food plan. Like there's not a whole lot of difference. It's just based on, no, our food plan is better than your food plan, or our food plan has grains, your food plan doesn't, whatever. My experience is that and basically just to finish that thought, I was a flunky. Like I couldn't do it. So I would get absent and then I blow it, get absent and blow it. And for the very reason you're talking about is I needed to go deeper, and for me, I just couldn't do that there. And so, and not to knock it, there are lots of people who get benefit from that.
I agree.
Yeah. But the thing is, for me, first of all, I don't think it makes any sense for somebody or for just a universal diet to work for all bodies. Like you can't tell me what's going to work best for my body. Like only I can determine that based on my reaction to food, my reaction to amounts, right? Like we're all snowflakes, like we're all different. So I do have a problem with saying, no, we're all going to eat this many carbs, this many, whatever grams or whatever. And it doesn't work for everybody. And so I don't even think that's healthy to tell everybody that they should eat dairy if maybe they shouldn't, or you can't stray off of that. So what I prefer and what I do with my work is I help people clear away that emotional baggage, like really address the underlying causes so they can get in touch with their bodies. Now, I don't think intuitive eating or mindful eating works when your signals are all off, right? When you're a binge eater, I intuited that I should eat all the time. So that was my version of intuitive eating is if there's food, I'm going to eat it. So what I had to do is I had to walk it back and start addressing, my stress, because so much of our eating is stress eating. For emotional eaters, I had to start getting connected to my emotional self, which I was from the neck up. I was a different person from the neck down, then the neck down, and so I wasn't in touch with my emotions. I was terrified of my emotions. Like I didn't want to feel. And so I was busy on the run, obviously snacking all the time. So we have to kind of pull it back and start to address, to me, it's addressing the emotional eating, the emotions, the stress, and also the habit, because it is a habit to just eat every time you're just bored or lonely or discouraged or, tired. And so there's some habitual eating in there too. But if you start to address those things and get more balanced around food, then you can hear the signals, like I like to call it your divine spirit, or your inner dietitian, like your body will give you signals, but you got to stop overeating to hear them. But you also have to stop running so fast so you can be connected to what's really going on inside of you. So it's not bad to have some kind of food plan, but the whole rigidity and making that plan your higher power, to me, I don't want those signals to come from outside of me. I want to get acquainted with myself where I can hear them inside.
Absolutely. I so agree with you. And I saw it in practice for so many years. There's another piece to the puzzle too. And that is, I'm sure you know the book by Julia Ross, Diet Cure.
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I also do in practice is I look at neurotransmitters, because when the neurotransmitters are off, they're going to use sugar as a substitute, and it increases, it helps the emotion for a moment, and then the blood sugar dips down. So you're wanting more and more sugar. So
Yeah.
it's, I think it's all of those pieces, and running away and not taking time, and, all of those kinds of connections as well makes a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's to me, that's why sugar and carbs are the primary go-to for emotional eaters, is like, they do give us that serotonin hit, they do calm us down, momentarily, obviously.
Primarily, absolutely. Yeah. Things I want to pick up on that you said that I so agree with, and that is that we are all different. What you need dietarily, what I need dietarily, and also our kind of our stories. If your mother was pregnant with you and didn't have a lot of food, you're going to have what I call conservation gene, meaning that you won't need a whole lot of food to kind of keep your body habitus at a certain weight. And we know that from the studies that were done in Holland, actually, during Second World War. So that's kind of interesting as well. So we are different. And the whole notion of Hollywood doesn't help us very much.
Right.
Like, yeah, they're airbrushed and everything else that goes along with it too. So that is another part. So how do you know the difference between physical and emotional hunger? That's a question that a lot of people kind of really struggle with. How do they know the difference between the two?
What's worked best for me and what I recommend to my clients is something that's very simple. It's called 3-meal magic, which is eating 3 meals with nothing in between. And as you know, there's a lot of benefits of just having that space between meals just for your digestion, let alone anything else, just like, let's give our bodies a break, let them do their job without packing more food in. But what I like most about it is that space between the meals enables me to get in touch with my emotions, and I mentioned earlier on that we need that. We need to start becoming acquainted with our emotional selves. Most of us have been in full flight, like from any kind of acquaintance with our emotional selves. So that space between the meals, there's going to be some hunger there, like you're going to start getting hungry as it gets closer to your second meal, to lunchtime, but that's not a bad thing. Like, getting acquainted with hunger signals is important. And the other thing I like about the 3-meal magic idea is that in between the meals, if you have the 3 meals rather, then you're going to be okay if there is hunger. Like, I know for emotional eaters, and this was true for me, because food saved our life once upon a time, right? Like, once upon a time, it's all we had to deal with dysfunction in our family, with abuse, with sexual abuse, with whatever trauma is going on, which so many of us have, or have had. We didn't have much to lean on. Like, we certainly weren't talking to our parents about this function. So we're like trying to just get through it. And food is one of the few ways we had to get through it. So what started out as an amazing coping tool obviously ends up not working for us later on. But there's that, because of that early on survival skill of eating, there tends to be a trigger inside of us if we don't eat for a long period of time, kind of like a danger, warning sign. And that's when we tend to go overboard and binge eat. That's why, intermittent fasting can be hard for emotional eaters, because they feel like they're going to die, because they have that old programming, right? Even though it's not true, it just feels like a danger signal. And so I find that when we do feed ourselves 3 times a day, even if you put 12 hours, like do the minimum of the intermittent fasting, 12 hours between dinner and breakfast, but having the 3 solid meals where you're nurturing your body, like you're letting your body know it's going to get more food. I find it to be so kind and gentle. And that's what we need to do. And we've had so many years of crazy diets, so many years of erratic eating and all these diet hacks that have not been good for us on any level. And so I find that there's really beautiful spiritual self-caring, messages that come when I'm like, I'm going to feed myself. Like, I'm going to get my next meal. It's going to happen. I'm going to put effort and time and care into that meal. And so I find that it's sort of retraining us and helping us move beyond that diet mentality, which is so beautiful on so many levels. So I find that 3 meal magic, it helps us get in touch with our emotions, because part of the hunger could be emotional hunger, right? So, but if you know you've eaten, if you know you fed yourself a good, healthy breakfast, then at 10 o'clock, when you're like, I think I should eat, which I still will sometimes be like, oh, is it lunchtime yet? But then I can say, no, Trish, you actually had a good breakfast. Lunch is at 12. So what's going on there? Like, what is that about? And then you can ask that question and explore, maybe it's time to do my taxes and it's the last thing I want to do. Or maybe there's a phone call I need to make and I just dread facing that uncomfortable situation. So that's where the emotional hunger comes in. But we can't know if it's like physical or emotional unless we are appropriately feeding ourselves, and then that space between the meals is where we can do some exploration. Is it just it's getting close to lunch, or is it not at all close to lunch, in which case maybe there's something emotional going on.
And if somebody's listening to this and they're saying, you know what, I don't know if this is true for me, or I think she's got a point, I think this is me, where do they begin? How do they start to kind of make some changes?
Yeah, so I want to talk about the PEP test. So the PEP test is a way for people to start connecting their cravings with their emotions. And it's a very simple way, because I think we've all heard, oh, you have to deal with the underlying causes. And then people think, oh, that means I have to go to therapy for 20 years before I figure this all out. But that's not my experience. We can make it much easier and quicker than that. So the PEP test is a way of determining, what, like, we already know what food does to us, unhealthy choices do to us. This is a way of determining what those foods are doing for us. And so PEP is an acronym, PEP. And the first P stands for painkiller. So food is a painkiller, like it works. When you feel bad and you eat, you feel better immediately. So when there's painful things going on in life, which there's no shortage of pain, right? There's no shortage of upset on any given day, whether it's somebody's words to you, or needing to uproot your family to go move for a job, or a death in the family. There's so much pain. So the fact is, we use food to soften the edges of pain. So we use food as a painkiller. That's the first P. The E stands for escape. So we use food as a form of escape. And what are we escaping from? We're trying to escape our minds. Okay. So the truth is, and that definitely happens with when our neurotransmitters are off. But my experience is, overall, overeaters are overthinkers. Okay, like we have racing minds. We're overthinking everything. What did she mean by that? Why did he look at me that way? I shouldn't have said that. Instead, I should have said this. I mean, my mind would never stop, and we use food to just slow it down, and to escape how crazy making it is to be, having these barrages of self-critical thoughts. And so we use food as a way of escaping our minds. The last P in PEP stands for punishment. And this seems a little counterintuitive because we think of food as a reward. But, when we go overboard, like I said, at my binge foods, and I was going to have one bowl of ice cream, but I ate the whole pint, right? Like, or a few cookies, but I ate the whole package. But for me, my eating turned self-abusive. Like, I would binge and it would hurt. I would physically hurt. And then the next day I would feel so mad at myself. I'd have all these self-recriminating thoughts. And then I wouldn't want to hang out with girlfriends because I was all bloated. And so I'd pull the curtains and do a little sheet therapy. Well, that's no reward. That sounds a lot more like a punishment, And so the fact is that, and we don't think of it that way, but the truth is, the way we eat, the way we gain weight and suffer with this problem is more of a punishment. And my experience is, as overeaters, we're also overfeelers, and we tend to feel guilty about everything, so we do use food to beat ourselves up. And so that's another thing that we need to take a look at. Like, why do I feel bad? What am I beating myself up about? Let's go there. Let's address that to where we feel worthy. Let's start working on feeling worthy of good treatment, especially by ourselves. So that's the PEP test, PEP, painkiller escape punishment. That is a great way to start making the connection. Okay, so next time you're like, I got to go check the refrigerator, see if some elf has put more food there, because you got to check, something might have happened from an hour earlier. So when you find yourself going to the refrigerator yet again, just check in, do the PEP test. Like, am I looking for a painkiller? Am I trying to escape something, that just won't shut up in my mind? Or is there something I feel bad about that needs to be addressed? And when you take the PEP test, you start to do that exploratory work, and that's what we need to do. It's not like, I want chocolate. Well, sure, chocolate's yummy, but there's more to it than that. And so that's what we need to do, is start going deeper, like looking into this. And, even though we've spent a lifetime trying to not look at it, it's a worthy exploration. It's a way to get to know ourselves. So that's the very first thing. I would also say that, in my book, I talk about the anatomy of the emotional eater. And these are 24 personality traits that make up the emotional eater's personality, like a composite personality composite. And I'm telling you, I've been researching this for over 30 years. And if you've met one of us, you've met all of us. And the number one trait of an emotional eater is people pleasing. So, it's rare that I meet an emotional eater who's not a people pleaser. And the thing about that is the people pleasing, first of all, comes from not having our own self-acceptance. We don't have our own validation, and we're seeking it from outside of ourselves. Again, it does go back, it goes back to early years where we didn't get a strong sense of ourselves. I didn't, and so we're seeking it outside ourselves. But the problem with that, and the reason why it has something to do with food, even though it doesn't seem like it, is that when we're breaking our neck trying to please everybody, trying to be all things to all people, we burn out our adrenals, as we burn out adrenals, we create, issues, gut issues, stress, and everything. And then not only that, but nobody's ever as pleased as we plan on them being. So then we're like, screw them, I'm going to reward myself. They didn't even notice that I pulled an all-nighter for this project. So, screw them, I'm going to go have my favorite meal. And that's where it ends up with food. It time and time again, because it's the perfect storm when you're tired and your adrenals are shot, and you feel left out. You feel like nobody cares, and so, but that's an example of how it's not an eating problem. It's really a living problem. And that's where people aren't putting their focus, and where they should put their focus. Like, how are you living such that you end up eating? We're always looking at the caboose on the train. We don't look at the beginning of the beginning cars and how they lead to the caboose, to the caboose. So people pleasing is something we can all work on. Getting in touch with what's yes for us. If you're invited to a party or to do some project, additional work at work or whatever at home, or for the soccer team or whatever, check in with yourself. First say, let me check my schedule and get back to you. Don't say yes right away. That's a big adjustment right there. Don't say yes right away. Say, thank you. Let me check my schedule and get back to you. And then check in with yourself. Can I do this without paying a high price? Can I afford this time and stress without it ending up with me not getting enough sleep, me being tired and resentful, and then eating, And if you can, then you can get back to them and say yes. But if you can't, it's time to learn the word no, And so just that in and of itself can give you more time in your day. It can help you be less resentful. It can help you feel like you're standing for yourself for once. We're so used to giving everything away, and putting ourselves last, but that has to change. And that's the living part. That's the living problem that needs solving. Not as, everybody knows what to eat. We're not stupid in that area, right? If we've been dieting for decades, we know that salads are probably better than hot dogs, and so it's really important that we start looking at what else we can change because we know what to eat. It's just a matter of not being able to follow through on what we know.
Yes, Don. So what about the distinction between somebody that is eating too much at a meal versus an emotional eater? Because there are people that just, they have 3 meals a day, but they eat too much.
Yeah, and that's where the habit comes in. So I feel like the compulsion to eat is made up of buried emotions, stress, and habit, pure habit. And I think that, but I will say this, so we have to break the habit. We have to start learning how to eat differently. And if somebody doesn't know how, obviously there's things you can do, a million YouTube videos you can watch. But my experience is we eat too much because oftentimes we're eating heavier foods. And I do think our heavier food choices do come from emotions. So, if we're just eating salads, we're going to feel lighter and we're going to have more feelings. And again, this is not conscious for people. They're like, nobody's like, I'm going to have more feelings by eating a salad. No, we don't have that conversation. But the reason why we like potatoes, the reason why we like fries, the reason why we like heavy meats and sauces and carbs, macaroni and cheese and bread is because it's got more weight to it and it does deaden our feelings. Like we're like happy, like we're happy in the moment. We're in that carb coma. But what, again, people need to start connecting with is there's a fear around eating lighter foods. Like there's a fear there. And the fear is like not consciously, but I guarantee if somebody digs into it, the fear is like, I'll waste away. Like I won't have my grounding. I won't have support and I won't feel good. I'll feel bad. And that absolutely could be. But those are the feelings you're snuffing out with carbs. And those are the feelings that need to start to be addressed, by writing, by talking, by praying, by meditating. We do have to have new coping tools instead of eating to kill those uncomfortable feelings. And we also need to acclimate. They're not terrible feelings. They're informative feelings. Why do you feel bad? Well, let's take a look. What am I doing in my life that's not working for me? Like, where am I continuing to hang out with people I don't even like? Maybe we can change that. So there's a lot to unpack, obviously.
Absolutely. It's interesting. If we look at the ACE study that was done by Folletti, in the late 1996, 98, it was around the time it came out. And he had, I don't know if you know the beginning of the study that he did. Do you know the story of it? It's interesting.
I'm not sure.
He was working with only women that were about 100 pounds overweight, and he had them on a liquid diet. And the liquid diet, they were all very successful, all losing enormous amounts of weight. And he had one of them come back and he said to her, instead of saying to her, how old were you? He said, how much did you weigh when you were first sexually active? And she said 30 pounds. So he had many of them come back, and about 85% of them had been sexually abused. Weight. So it's the notion of protection and padding and not being able to kind of look at some of those deeper emotions, and for good reason. For some of them, it's so painful to go back.
Yep, no question.
But the good news is that it's possible. The good news is that there are solutions. The good news is that you can learn to trust yourself. The good news is that there are also so many programs now that don't involve years and years of deep grief and therapy, which is amazing. So that's for people for sure. And I think, that there's also a distinction, which I love what you say, is that there are people that are emotional eaters, there's hands down, and there are people that have had poor choices or went into menopause or whatever, and hormones changed, adrenals changed, and they need a whole different approach versus the people that really need to dig deeper. For what their story is. Because what I say to people is, if you don't deal with your story at some point in your life will deal with you. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Yeah, no question. Absolutely.
That makes a big difference. So if people want to learn a little bit more about your program and find out a little bit more about you, how do they do that?
My website is a great place to start. It's healyourhunger.com, healyourhunger.com. That quiz I referred to, that emotional eating quiz to determine if you're an emotional eater or a food addict, is on my homepage of my website. So that's super helpful. And I do, I have my book out called Heal Your Hunger, and on Instagram, I'm Tricia Nelson _. So, and I have a podcast called The Heal Your Hunger Show. So, but that website's always a good place to start, and everything's kind of resourced from there.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's very different than the people that I see in my weight loss program. My people are really menopausal, hormonal, food allergies, food sensitivity. So it's very, very different. And this is a wonderful place for people to go if emotional eating is the issue, because if it doesn't get healed, it will never resolve.
Amen. That's true. It doesn't get up and go away on its own. It comes back, it rears its head, and it's never pretty.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. Back at you. I love what you're doing for people to help them feel better.